All right, well, are you seeing the screen now, team? Well, is that a yes?
Sorry?
Yeah, everyone's seeing the screen? We're okay?
Yes, yes.
All right.
It's looking good.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. So, as some of you may be able to tell, I'm based here in Denver, Colorado, so it is still dark here, and it's going to be a beautiful day, as always, in Colorado. Very nice to meet you all, and I look forward to spending time with you over the next, 30, 45 minutes to an hour. And I would encourage you to please do use the chat, and let's see if we can keep this discussion very interactive as we go through the process. All right. So again, my name is Jim Hussey, and I'm speaking to you today really as a representative of the Institute for the Advancement of SaaS Management, or SaaS Governance and Optimization. So I spent a lot of time working in this community, and as the headline of this, the move towards SaaS Ops, this market, SaaS management, is moving very, very quickly. So I would fully expect that this organization will shortly have a certification on SaaS Ops, which I believe is emerging rapidly. Okay, so I'm going to try to make sure I can see the chats as we go along, but anyway, I'll leave that be. So we're going to talk today about the emergence of SaaS Ops, but I'm going to take the time to really work through a series of research efforts that have been done in the market today. And again, SaaS management has become a red hot topic in the world of IT asset management, and it's emerging across North America, Asia, and Europe. But what's interesting is I have the fortunate position to be working with organizations in different parts of the globe. And it is interesting to see how it varies, that there's a difference in terms of how these things are emerging. And I can speak to that as we go through the process. Okay. And again, this presentation will be made available to you, via the association. The Institute, a little bit about the Institute. I do, as you can perhaps tell, I've got some gray hair. My background is ultimately journalism and research way back in the day. And as I go through the efforts here to help define and further best practices, what becomes apparent is that everyone, the vast majority of people interested in this subject, are still trying to figure out what's the best approach, what's the right first step. So as I've done a number of sessions at the World Commerce and Contracting Association, and working with the vendors and organizations focused in this area, it's become very, very apparent that there's a need for an independent, objective, content source. So my focus via the Institute is to continually put out a series of content, whether it be research-based or case studies or insights, to help organizations such as yourselves and individuals figure out what is this world of SaaS, how do I effectively govern and optimize it, and then ultimately, through those governance efforts, how do I apply artificial intelligence. So just a little bit about myself. So as a researcher, I always like to take a look at what is this individual's orientation, right? We used to have a saying in journalism: consider the source. And I think in this day and age, that's very, very important. So I'm the author of the Survival Guide to SaaS Optimization and the founder of the Institute. But for a moment, I'll share a little bit about my background. I spent years as a publisher, writing about technology, working with newspapers such as Computer World and Byte magazine, which moved over to an online version many years back. I took a corporate job at a company called Western Union that many of you may know. And in Western Union, I was vice president of IT vendor management. And in my functional areas that I was responsible for, I was responsible for IT asset management, telecom expense management, product and portfolio management. So I had a number of different functions. And I think what that does, now that I'm independent from Western Union, is it gives me really good insight into the inner workings of an organization and the requirements or the focus of those various functions. For those of you who may be from a financial sector, I was also responsible for a function called third-party risk management. So that's something that we'll talk about a little bit as we go through the coming slides. The Institute, I'm very pleased, very proud that so many of the SaaS management platform leaders and participants in the SaaS community have stepped up to sponsor the efforts of the Institute. And one thing I will note here is that there's no financial commitment on the part of these organizations. Their commitment is to help facilitate the creation of the content and participate. So again, independent, objective, and we do not accept or any payment in any way, shape, or form. We do via my LinkedIn page for the Institute, we do sell training and tutorials, things of that nature, in order to fund the content development. And I'm pleased to say there'll be some new introductions on this slide shortly. Okay. In addition to the provider council, I maintain a 5-member industry council, and those members I've promised anonymity, and that's important because if they do share their names and they become visible, they tend to get besieged by salespeople. So we're keeping them as anonymous, but they do very much shape the content and help me validate, the content so it's accurate and reflective of the dynamics in the market. Okay, so kind of a balancing act. So the need for SaaS management. Gartner has done a great job over the last couple of years talking about the rapid growth of SaaS and how governing SaaS is going to require a different mindset. And what we're seeing, and I'm sure many of you who are joining us today, is listening in, because in your organization, there's a number of different dynamics that are occurring. And what I find in particular in working with clients is that they truly don't have a handle on the number of SaaS applications in their environment, and it causes them quite a surprise. For those of you from regulated industries, this is a considerable risk. Again, my experience at Western Union, a highly regulated financial organization, really the risk of using SaaS really far outweighed the issue around optimization. So effective governance and optimization is going to be key. And as we move towards the discussion on automation, it's going to emerge that SaaS Ops will be really the activity within the IT asset management function that will ultimately prove to be of greatest value, in my opinion. But let's talk about some research in a moment. We all know it's growing, and one of the items that we at the Institute are focused on is there's so much data available to people about how many applications are in the environment, SaaS applications, and how many of those were unknown. And the suppliers, the vendors, the platform providers do a great job of bringing that out. Our job as the Institute is to really produce content that says, okay, so what? What do I do now? And that's what our focus is. But let's take a look. One of the interesting things about SaaS is we talk about SaaS as a big generic, blob. It has no distinguished characteristics other than it's a subscription model. But there's two core parameters that we talk about in SaaS circles. is one is optimization and one is risk. And all of the leading SaaS management platforms, I'm going to talk a bit about BetterCloud. We probably all are familiar with Xylo and all of the others that are emerging. We talk about optimization, but the conversation is slowly turning towards risk. Okay. Now, there's a number of different ways to view the SaaS universe. And what I'm talking about is all SaaS in your ecosystem. So to the lower left there, you have enterprise SaaS. So Office 365, Salesforce, ServiceNow, and then the HCM stands for Human Capital Management. So most mid to large enterprises, well, all mid to large enterprises are going to have an application such as a Workday or a SuccessFactors or Oracle HCM, but those are all SaaS models. So as we look at the enterprise and we talk from large to small, those tend to offer very rich optimization opportunities. Really what's happening is organizations in the ITAM space and those that are responsible for maintaining, let's say, the subscription levels, it's a subtle shift between perpetual license to SaaS. But those applications tend to have low risk. They have great, rich enterprise optimization opportunities, so very significant. And Gartner will talk about 30% wasted in terms of SaaS spend. But as you could imagine, 30% of your Office 365 spend, if you could optimize that and plow that back into another area of your organization, that has some very, very good benefit, right? So that's to the left. Now, what happens is there's going to be SaaS applications that have gone through some sort of a governance validation. And, we can consider those sanctioned. Next to that are SaaS applications that have not gone through any sort of a validation. They're out there. They're kind of tolerated, but ultimately you would like to see them become sanctioned. And that we'll talk a little bit about the governance requirements to do that. But in the red box, the long tail of SaaS applications in a mid to large enterprise, while they do offer an optimization, and I can't ignore that, there is an optimization opportunity there, but based on level of spend, you're going to see that optimization could be relatively small. The bigger issue is risk associated with those. So we really want to get our arms around those particular SaaS applications and make sure that we're managing the data governance and all the other aspects of that, as we'll talk about in a moment. And then across the bottom, one of the things that we're seeing is an emergence, and I think this is very, very typical, whether it's third-party risk management, software asset management, even in your hardware, disposal processes, emergence of managed services. So some of those will focus exclusively on Office 365, let's say, that you could just hand off to this organization that features some sort of a portal, the ability to manage that so you don't need to staff, or the emergence of a full end-to-end managed service. People such as Xylo are taking on real managed service, end-to-end managed service. And then from, if you just wanted to focus on that unsanctioned, let's say, the renewal aspect of that, there's organizations like Vendor and Sastrify that are jumping into that space. So we really have a dynamic SaaS community. And for those of us who could remember 8-track versus or beta versus VHS, we're really not sure which solution is going to win the day, but it's important to pay attention. Okay, so really there's some core building blocks as we go through this, right? Ultimately, what we need the SaaS management platform to help us do is to discover, really fill out what is the full picture of our SaaS environment. And again, large to mid enterprises, they certainly know what they're doing with Salesforce and Office 365. A lot of news over the last 24 hours. Our friends at ServiceNow have put out their financials, and they're just incredible. So I suspect many of you have Office 365, Salesforce, and ServiceNow in your ecosystem, and those are big spend and great opportunities to optimize. But we also then want to discover what else is out there. Once we have a good handle on that, we then want to determine our optimization strategy. And it'll vary by segment that we were just talking about. And we'll also vary our governance approach based on segment, right? So the attention that you'll pay to Salesforce is going to be very different than the attention you'll pay to a project management SaaS application that perhaps has been endorsed by your IT team or your marketing team. Right, so this tends to be the quick waterfall of what goes on and what the focus is for SaaS management professionals. So I'd like to take a few moments. We at the Institute facilitated a research study in the fall of last year, and all of the provider members of the advisory council provided input in the survey, and as did our industry panel. So it's truly a unique objective piece of information. And again, our goal was not to say how many applications are in the ecosystem, because that's, in many ways, it's kind of, in my mind, self-serving to the industry. But anyway, what's the current state, right? And I don't know how you compare to this. And so take a look in terms of the current status. And what we're finding is that many people are still in discussion around SaaS management. And one of the things I'm observing as I work with clients, and my clients will tend to be SaaS management providers as well as end user organizations. What I'm beginning to see is what I call a tool syndrome, right? Selling the tool versus understanding what is strategically we're trying to accomplish. So I think the Institute, I'll be taking the content that we produce more towards how do we facilitate a more strategic view of SaaS management versus a tool heavy. But at the end of the day, a tool is required. So what we see is we got 23% of the respondents who are in active requirement development. So I interpret that to mean they're talking internally, saying, what is it we need to do to get our arms around our SaaS portfolio? But if more importantly, and again, if you're an ITAM professional, this is interesting on the bottom, is so many organizations are impacted by SaaS. So we have the opportunity to be an orchestrator, facilitator, a collaborator. And the more we can do that, the more value we're going to have in terms of establishing a true enterprise-wide SaaS management function. And it's important. Otherwise, we're just buying a tool and it's in the back wall, the back room, and may not, ultimately have the value that we intend. So that's the current state. What are the primary use cases? And again, this will be available to you via the association sharing this slides with you on LinkedIn, and also my email and everything's on the last slide. Discovery effectiveness is by far, and statistically, you're looking for anything that's a 0.2 to indicate a significant difference. But number one, discovery effectiveness, no surprise there. Number two, SaaS application renewal is the buzzword, right? And for me, interesting. I'm not so focused on renewal management. I first want the organizations, my clients that I work with, I first want them to figure out, how do we rationalize the number of SaaS we've identified? How do we consolidate? How do we create the appropriate catalog for a SaaS stack for our enterprise? And then we can easily divide between sourcing, procurement, and a third-party service to effectively manage that renewal. But it's top of mind to everyone. And now what you begin to see is kind of a grouping, triggers and alerts, usage, SaaS automation, and that's where ultimately this is all going to be heading. So I believe executing this study in another 18 months that the numbers here will begin to really shine for automation. And again, the top use cases, renewal management at number 2, and SaaS application discovery as a distant number 1 across the others. And what's been fun is I've been taking these results and I've been talking to the CEOs of all the SaaS management companies, as well as my advisory board of users. And it is interesting to see the perspectives. Sometimes if you're a small enterprise versus a mid to large, there's a different approach. Okay, but what are the discovery priorities? And this is really an interesting one, because all of this tends to focus on single sign-on, tying into your employee expense, tying into your IT finance, and that's the data that the SaaS management platforms are looking to ingest. But as I'll be talking about, I'm going to be doing shortly a tutorial for the Institute on creating visibility of your SaaS portfolio in your organization. But it's really important for us as ITAM professionals to go talk to InfoSec, talk to third-party risk, talk to IT finance, and even the SaaS management platform is going to identify these SaaS applications. We need to marry it up with these other data sources and really begin to show a comprehensive view of SaaS. But again, these tend to be the primary ways. I am seeing a slow emergence here in terms of organizations, their network team generating reports, and based on bandwidth, being able to identify certain websites that are highly visited. But that's an emerging one. So what are our current best practices? So ultimately, who's accountable? And again, I think this is interesting. Sourcing professionals are today the ones who are being handed or challenged, right? I work with many organizations where the chief procurement officer is saying, I've added SaaS to my software category manager. And obviously, well, not obviously, but that poor individual is going to be overwhelmed, right? So that's where services like Vendor and SaaStrify can come in very, very handy. But we're also seeing great involvement of ITAM, software asset management, as well as vendor management and others. So right now, I think what we're going to see as ITAM professionals is that we really need to be the leader and really push the messaging on why this is a strategic element, that analysis is required, and we need to have visibility to the C-suite. I have found in my dealings that as IT asset management, particularly in the US, it's a sub-function within IT ops. IT ops is a sub-function within IT infra. So we really want to make sure we're getting the right visibility. And what is it we want to do? Once we have a good handle on the SaaS applications, we really need to sit down as a cross-functional team and come up with the policies and controls. And that's what this is reflecting here is, do you have policies and controls today as it relates to SaaS? And my God, the risk organizations, if you have one, InfoSec, they're going to be heavily involved or need to be heavily involved in that. And then here's some of the current activities, right? So again, renewal coordination jumps out, harvesting of the licenses to Gartner. Gartner's point is you want to make sure that you're optimizing and not leaving subscriptions on the shelf because they cost money every month. And then you're going to have the emergence of these SaaS technologies, right? So we're all seeing a lot of movement there. Best practices to optimize and to target. I'll move through this because I really do want to get to this area here on renewal management. So if you looked at progression, discover, renew, And now I think when we get to governance, that's where SaaS Ops is really going to become a key item. So automatic renewal alerts, we want to be able to renew based on some SaaS usage, right? So the ability of your SaaS management platform to produce that kind of data. If it's a Salesforce or Office 365, even ServiceNow, there's some portals or tenants that the team can be generating usage data. And again, I urge organizations to get beyond aggregate reporting. Make sure you get down to individual usage. And one of the things that I've had great success with is having organizations export out of the portal, Office 365, for example, and then ask for a current list of your Active Directory user universe in your organization, and just try to normalize the two. And you'll find there's a significant number of people who are disabled or inactive in Active Directory who are consuming licenses. So a great way in which to optimize that. But again, you would go through that effort only when it is going to be of value to the organization. Okay. And SaaS automation. So the whole purpose of our discussion today, and I will be honest, that this made me sit back and really think about where we're headed as a community, because so much of the discussion today is around discovery and renewal. But let's assume we've established a SaaS catalog. Xylo likes to call it freedom in the framework. For those of us with a SAM background, we know it's a software catalog. These are the approved, software. If you try to buy something outside of that, you have an exception process. But really what we want to be able to do is, once we understand what is the right mix of SaaS for our SaaS stack, what are the activities that we need to do to protect our organization? And this is where the SaaS Ops is emerging. So if you take a look here, what are the capabilities of greatest importance to the respondent is the automated actions across a large universe of applications. So what you're seeing today is a lot of the SaaS management platforms continue to promote the number of SaaS applications they have APIs into, which is important, right? Then what the ability is to build the workflows. And this is where I think a certification that will emerge very rapidly is a SaaS Ops certification. Regardless of whatever tool you're using, do you have the ability to build the right parameters by which licenses or SaaS are assigned, harvested, the files that are out at that SaaS application are retrieved and assigned appropriately? So those are the things that are quickly becoming very, very important, and that's reflected here in this bottom chart. All right. So what's the takeaways from this particular piece? And we'll begin to move into the real important area of SaaS Ops. Is you need to have a solid discovery capability, but I urge you, don't just focus on the unknown. When we as SaaS professionals recite anything to our organization, we need to be able to be knowledgeable on the full SaaS portfolio. We may not be responsible, and likely will not be responsible, for governing and optimizing Office 365, but we need to be able to talk about that within the framework of SaaS. Automation is rapidly emerging, and accountability is yet to be really formalized, right? And it's not necessarily going to fall into ITAM unless we as ITAM professionals really begin to push and talk about it from a very strategic standpoint. All right. So emergence of SaaS Ops, I think that's why we're all here. And I'm going to borrow very heavily. There's a SaaS platform, and you may be aware of them. They're actually one of the more established SaaS platforms. It's called BetterCloud. And what I like about BetterCloud is that they've primarily been working through IT over the years. So they've been in existence for better part of 10 years. And I think because of their IT orientation, they really have a good grasp on the issues related to effectively managing the SaaS application portfolio. So they are well beyond the optimization, and renewal, and really digging into those particular disciplines, right, that you need to have in order to effectively govern the data, govern the files, make sure that the processes are in place by which subscriptions are added and removed, and done so in a manner that reduces vulnerabilities, right? So again, I think that they have a very, very good handle on where we're going as an organization. They put out a study called the State of SaaS Ops 2021. And again, we're independent and objective, but as a researcher, this is a darn good piece of research, and I think worth your time. If this is a subject that's important to you, in my opinion, this is the best piece of research that's been put out. And of course, you have to filter out. BetterCloud obviously wants to, secure more clients, so you can filter that out. But there's some information here that's really cool, right? And the challenge that we have is if we're not effectively doing SaaS ops, we just don't have visibility to the data files and the folders that are sitting out in these unknown apps. And we don't know the permissions, the configurations, and you can read through this. But these are the issues that we as SaaS ops have the opportunity to really get our arms around and take control of. And by doing so, in close collaboration with InfoSec, in close collaboration with compliance or risk organizations in your organization, it allows us to set up clearly the controls by which we need to manage our SaaS applications. So I'm a big fan of this. And again, I think the next research survey that we do as the Institute, I'm going to be looking to dive in more to this. In fact, I'm looking to sponsor a series on this discussion with the CEOs of the SaaS management platforms. So what are their concerns? So here's another one that I thought, again, very much security related. So for those of you who interface with InfoSec, many times InfoSec will have their own CMDB. They're trying to stay off and make sure they're protecting the enterprise as they should be. But some of the challenges that are concerns is because we don't know, right? What are the security policy violations that we're seeing out there? And while it's good to know that someone can be offboarded in 24 hours of departure, we're not quite clear what that means. And as you probably are thinking, there's a long checklist of items that need to occur if someone is offboarded. And that's where the automation is going to come in very, very quickly. Forwarding work to your personal email. I know I'm guilty of that at times. I never really thought about it as a SaaS exposure. So it's something that people do harmlessly without necessarily thinking about it. Okay. So these are the security related concerns. And I think, again, the implementation of automation in the enterprise via these tools such as BetterCloud is going to put us in a far better position. And it'll continue to evolve. All right. Biggest security concerns. Interesting. The one thing that I will say is this study really focused on InfoSec. But for those of you who are risk professionals, there's a whole other dynamics that you need to address there. And in my book, the Survival Guide to SaaS Optimization, I speak a great deal about the importance of the risk organization, compliance organization. And when you marry up InfoSec and risk and what we're doing in ITAM, it's a very powerful three-headed beast, let's say. And you can get visibility at the C-suite by doing that. Okay. But again, not knowing where our data is, access privileges, and so forth. So these are the policies and controls that we're going to want to set up, which were defined by our understanding of each of the segments, and then being able to measure it and intercede when things don't meet or align with our policies. Okay. So what are we going to do? We need to establish a SaaS Ops approach. And what's really interesting about SaaS is it impacts so many functions. So as you walk around the organization, whether this be called ITAM or SAM, as you walk around the organization, you can walk into your governance, risk, and compliance team and say, what are your issues and concerns with SaaS? They have them. We should understand them. IT finance, pretty straightforward. They have no idea what money is being spent on, so we need to try to help them. Sourcing, they're charged with making sure that our money is best spent. And unfortunately, that long tail of SaaS applications is just proliferated across the business units. And again, our goal is not to stop the business units from doing it. Our goal is just to make sure we know what they're doing and making sure we're helping them optimize their budgets. Right? Everyone fights hard for their budget. Let's make sure that they're getting value for their money. And again, the vendor management organization at InfoSec. So as establishing a SaaS management function within your organization, it's really about facilitating and bringing these teams together to really form a comprehensive view of what SaaS management needs to look like in your organization, where you can balance innovation and the drive to a digital, transformation, but do so in a manner that's optimized and does not expose your organization to unnecessary risk and vulnerabilities. Now, I showed you this little thing earlier, right? So what I was trying to do here is show that you really have to weave together as a SaaS manager. There may be multiple data sources that you would then combine with other internal ones. So you have your SAM platform, things like Yuzu, Flexera, Snow, ServiceNow with their modules. You then want to be able to integrate and align with your SaaS management platform, Xylo, BetterCloud, Bimi in France. There's many emerging ones that you can be talking to. And then the Renewal platform. I think the Renewal platform, maybe as a standalone, may be a passing fad because, for example, Xylo has just announced some very significant renewal management capabilities there, but really the first movers in that space are Vendor and Sastrify. But when you bring these together, and then what I also like are other incremental data sources within your organization. I particularly like InfoSec, third-party risk compliance. I think those are very valuable data sources, but you bring them together. Now that you understand your full footprint and you have the operations and the activities defined, you now support that. And that's what the orange box is meant to show, that it's a SaaS ops automation and workflow, continual workflow alignment. And then ultimately your SaaS management office, SMO, you have a front office and back office capability. So for us in ITAM, it's really, really important that front office, the ability to produce intelligence and knowledge and get that to the appropriate stakeholders and sponsors is really a key differentiator. Okay. So that was a lot, and I apologize. And again, based on my screen here, I really wasn't able to see any of the chat as they progressed. But I did want to make sure, as is appropriate, I wanted to first make certain. So I got approval from the team at BetterCloud to share their research, and I've embedded the link here. If you get the presentation, if you choose. Otherwise, that's the email address, stateofsaasops.bettercloud.com. Again, great piece of research, and I look forward to seeing them deliver more to the community as time goes by. You'll also be able to find the research that I cited from the Institute at the Institute. So if you go to my LinkedIn, and you're able to then click on over to the Institute for the advancements of SaaS governance and optimization. And you'll be able to download the research study in full there. And again, I'm proud of that research, and I guess any good piece of research raises more questions than it answers. So look for continued research and content to come from the team that I'm assembling.